And now I need to pull you up because I can't see you anymore. There we go. We're live. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to a branch of Laurels. I'm a Shaxi from Ontier, and tonight I'm interviewing Katrine, who is also from Ontier, and she's one of my Laurel crushes. She has been for a very long time. Welcome. So we usually start these off with what your SCA origin story is. So can you tell us how you found the SCA and what attracted you to it?
Sure. So I went to Western Washington University up in Bellingham, and sometime around 1980, I went to a parade in downtown Bellingham, and coming down the street in a wooden cart was a whole bunch of characters dressed in medieval garb. And I thought, those are my people. There they are. And sometime later, there was a sign on the elevator about an event that was going on. I didn't actually go to that, but I made a note of who was all involved. And I had gotten my degree and then kind of went back home and ran into a crowd of friends that said, hey, we're going to go to this medieval event. I bet you will like it. I'm like, those are my people. And so the first event I ever went to was the second Ursulmus, which was in out by Everett at the armory there, and Alfred was king. So it was my very first event.
Wow.
My first king. So he holds a special place in my memory of that event. And several people from that event are active, which amazes me, the longevity of people that just might stop by on a whim and then end up being in the room going, I'm home, no longer misunderstood. So then I was part of a household for a while, and I lived in Blatha on Nor, and I was their second ever chronicler, was there when they became a barony. And after that, I moved up to the Seattle area and still played in Blatha Nor and then a little bit in Madrona. And after that, I had moved out of the state for about a year and then came back and then again kind of played in the South Seattle area. And in about 93 moved to Three Mountains, where I've been ever since. But it's really hard when you're in the SCA and you move. You start up and you're somebody, and then you move and it's all like fresh and new all over again. So I was kind of a slow start. I do know that I have loved the history of costume since I was a tiny little girl. I got in trouble and got put on restriction for going into the Mississippi woods where there were snakes, and I wasn't supposed to go in there. I was about 8 years old, and we didn't have much in the way of books in our house, but we had a set of encyclopedias. And in that set of encyclopedias were quite a large section on the history of dress. And so these are the pictures that I grew up with that started this all. It's hand-drawn by Henny Harold Hansen. And it started, and then I followed every costume book I could ever get my hands on after that I read. And I also was interested in mythology and art and just history in general. And I think it all started when my mom brought me to see Camelot when I was about 8 years old. Here in Camelot. So my father hated the movie, but I was all like King Arthur and the Knights. So I was that fair lady in waiting, or maybe a knight, because I could go either way. But so that's kind of how that interest all started with me, and I just kept on going, and found a home and found friends, and that's really kind of my origin story.
That's awesome. What did you end up going to school for costuming, or what did you? I know you've kind of been a lifelong learner.
So I went to school for psychology, and I also studied humanities along the way. And I was, some people in college are a little bit different. And so I did all the psychology, and then I had extra credits. So I ended up taking Chaucerian English and Shakespeare, and kind of studying those things on the side. It's kind of always been like, I always kind of thought myself as like a Victorian lady archaeologist, where, I have the stuff that I have to concentrate for a living, my work, but this is my true passion. It's on the side. And because I have a job, I can afford to feed this passion without having to get paid for it, because it's kind of hard to find paying gigs to do this.
Yeah. And the ones that pay don't pay much.
So that's the start. And I started making costumes right away. So even before I was in the SE, I think I was a freshman in college. I went down to the basement where all the costume books were and read every book that was in the basement. And so one of my early influences was this Tudor costume, the old Norris book, which I know by heart. So let's see if I can find a picture in here. Anyway, so all of these things. And I really liked making 12th century garb. Was my favorite. It's always been my favorite. I went to one college that had a pretty sizable theater department. And for my student worker job, I had to push the dust mop up and down the hall. And there was a display case of the history of costume there, and I would always stop and look at it. And one of the outfits in there was a Bleo in there. It's like, oh, that's the best costume of all. So I kind of started making that. I'll show you my very second costume I ever made. Let's see if I could get this up and share the screen with you.
Before we went live, you said you think you've made 12 black Bleos for yourself.
I think it's probably closer to 8, but maybe all the Bleos I've made all together, is in the dozens. But let me get to share the screen. Sorry, a little slow here. So this is the very first one I ever made, and this was an event they held out on the Spencer State Park, where the Ontario Navy came in the early days. So it must have been about like 1985 or 1986. And here I am on the ferry with the wind blowing my sleeves back. So it was like made out of a black thing, that a red kind of burgundy cloth that looked like wool, and it has some fake black fur on it. And it's tied up on the side with leather strings, but it actually was pretty close to what it needed to be. So that was pretty amazing.
It's beautiful.
And I always really did like that dress. I thought it looked kind of cute on me. So, I didn't come into this with a lot of sewing skill. I had made some clothes on the sewing machine when I was a kid, but I come from a rather large family, so you didn't get a lot of time to do much of anything other than kind of chores and help take care of brothers and sisters. So I didn't have a lot of push to do creative things, although I did take band in high school and learn how to play the French horn to complete my nerd.
Your trifecta of nerdiness.
So,
when did your love of languages come into play?
Well, so my mother is German. So she was born in Berlin in 1940 during the middle of the bombing of her city. So she's got a really terrible backstory, a lot of angst and death. But she met my father. He was an American serviceman. He was an air traffic controller. And they fell in love in 1958. And they had to get permission to marry, but he took her back to the States, to Mississippi, where I was born. And so she didn't know any English. So actually German is my first language. But I grew up also in the US. And when I was 3, we moved to Germany in an area by Trier, which is a very old kind of area in the mountains with a lot of beautiful old vineyards along the Moselle River. And we would go to Trier, and we go to lunch in a Ratskeller, so one of the ancient basements where you could get a sausage and lemonade. And I remember it clearly, was all painted up with people in houppelons, that style, right? And I adored that place. And I liked it so much that when I met an exchange student at PSU that came from Trier, I asked him what happened to it. And apparently it was bought over by some Hungarians, and it's now a Hungarian restaurant, and all the cool paintings are gone. But so that's kind of in my background. When I was about 6, we went on a trip to Bavaria, and we stayed near the Ludwig's fantasy castle, the Neuschwanstein. And my father hired a sleigh for us, and it was snowing as we went up to the Disney castle, the real Disney castle. And I don't know if you ever looked at pictures that are inside of the castle, but it's Victorian renditions of the 12th century kind of garb. So I think that all of these kind of influences were sitting in the back of me. When I was just about 7, we moved back to the US, and my sisters and I were speaking German, and apparently this happened in New York City. And I said to my sister, everybody's looking at us weird because we're talking in German. We're not speaking in German anymore. So my German ability stopped at around age 8. And then it wasn't an option in my high school. So I took French instead and learned that. And then when I went back to university, my first year, I took some German. It was pretty easy, but I decided that I was further ahead in French and that I would minor in that. And so I kind of early studied, and then took some Russian in college too. So I thought about being a linguist. It's one of the things I had this like dream that I would go to maybe the United Nations and be a translator or something like that. But it ends up that I'm not so glib of the tongue. And so I have to think a long time before I speak. So maybe it wouldn't have been the best job for me, but that was my dream as a kid. Either that or be the announcing lady at the airport. Now landing TWA flight 538. I use my phone voice. So anyway, those were kind of my dreams, as I was growing up, things I would like to do. And but those kind of just were kind of in the background. But let me tell you how kind of this idea of translating and working on things started. So I had a friend, she's passed away now, but her name was Jana. And Jana was the sister of Duke Ronald Wilmot of the East, but then was the West. So she had moved up to South Seattle from California, was living there with her boyfriend. And we met at an event, and I worked so close to her house, and it was just like a 2-person office, and I was often there alone. We would often do lunch together. So she came from the Renaissance Pleasure Fair background in California, so really liked the Tudor time period, and she got me to try out some of the later garb. Let me show a picture of me in this Tudor outfit she decked me up in. I think this is at a Blathenor Yule feast somewhere. You go to so many events, you know that you've been there, but where were they at? I don't even remember.
Yes, some of the people we've interviewed have like they remember their first 5 events in the 70s, and I'm like, I can't remember last year.
So here I am acting cheesy in this Tudor outfit. So then, by this time, it's already been 10 plus years in the SCA, and I was really rather serious about costuming, and I thought, well, maybe I should try this later period. It's got a lot of pizzazz, kind of look cute in it. There was, just 1 or 2 books on Bleo, right? So I didn't know really how to research on that. And then my friend said, well, there's so many people that do Tudor, you need to differentiate yourself. So this is like in 1993, I think this all happened. And so she said, I found a group that does German Renaissance costuming. You should join that group because there's nobody leading it. I think she didn't say anything quite that dramatic, but there's a lot of talk, but nobody knows how to read any German. So, so I did and hung out for about 6 months, and then I learned about this book right here. It's called Textiler Hausrat. So this is kind of what they called like the Janet Arnold of German costuming. It's written by the uh, person that is the costume person at the German National Museum. So it's very complete, written from different kind of inventories, and nobody could read it. So I just said, I'll give it a shot. I haven't read any German since I'm 8, but I think I could do this, right? And so I sat down and I copied these out at first by hand and translated every word. So I didn't enough feel for the language to know how sentences went together. So that wasn't so weird. And I knew, kind of like the basic words, but many of these words this is more of an academic tone. So German put like 4 or 5 words together. So you had to figure out how to break them apart and then put them back together to know what they meant. So I did that for a while and I got a lot faster. And then after I'd done that for a while, Google Translate came on. And so then I just learned to type it and then put it through the translator and then retype it. So that's kind of how I got some reputation for this. And then I'll show you my first Lens Connect outfit that I did, which was funny.
Google Translate, it's been my experience, doesn't recognize textile terms.
Well, what's really weird, it didn't at the beginning at all. But what's so sweet about it is that if you tell it what that word means, it puts it into its lexicon, and it's intelligent and it's starting to learn. So more and more, it's figuring out, but it doesn't like medieval words very well yet. It's like, what? But, textile terms are kind of a limited vocabulary. So once you've got them, you see them in context, then you kind of know what's going on. All right, let's go back.
I think that's one of the keys to researching historical costume is first understanding that a lot of the archaeologists don't understand textiles at all. So they'll call anything that looks complicated knitting, and you have to really kind of figure out where they're coming from and do some of your own analysis.
There's one book called Daily Living in the 12th Century by really a well-respected person for the time. It's a little bit older. When you get to the chapter on textiles, it's all out the window. So there's one passage where he translated something called latrissa into knitting, but what it really was treillisses, which means it's a trill, right? So it's three shaft cloth, pretty rough, right? So, but he translated that as knitting. So, that's also another joy of catching them. Like, I got you. Well, let me show you my first Lens Connecty.
Okay.
So, all wrong in about a gazillion different ways, but still, I thought it looked good. So I'm also carrying my little ferret Kiko in my hand there. So that's one of my accessories. Have ferret will travel. So yeah, I made this out of. I have found. I've not always been flush on cash, so I've always kind of been a thrifty shopper, and I found this at Hancock Fabrics white corduroy for 50 cents a yard. So I'm going to make myself a white gown out of it. It's actually kind of rather cute. And so that was my first attempt at going German. So
I've made an Elizabethan corduroy Elizabethan for the same reason.
You could just pop this white thing in the washer, right? So yeah, and here, this is July.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, this is me, right? Oh, let's just overdress for this event. When I was younger, I went through this thing like, we got to do three set changes every day. We have to change up our costumes, which in the past has made some of my companions really rather laugh. Like, what are you going to put on now? It's the same outfit, just a different layer.
I'm lucky if I get out of my pajama pants by dinner at events.
For me, this is kind of, I enjoy the costume aspect of it so much that I don't have a lot of opportunity to wear them other places or for other things, and I enjoy making them.
Yeah.
Uh, so that was that attempt. So anyway, I eventually turned into the moderator of the German Renaissance costuming Yahoo group, and set myself up as a semi-expert. And there wasn't anybody there to actually argue with me, so so there you have it. But what was really amazing, and one of the things I would say to people when they are contemplating trying to really research a subject, is find like-minded individuals to be your friends, be your mentors, to ask you questions, to give you a push to go out and find the answer. And I I was so willing to answer questions, because what I found out is anytime you worked on a question for somebody else, it opened up a font of knowledge that you wouldn't have otherwise. And not only are you enriching yourself, but you're giving it back, and you're kind of opening the stream of knowledge and light that just kind of moves on to the next person.
And
So,
half the
yeah.
time they will go on and do research that you haven't done yet. And you get to learn so much because every time a different brain gets into a subject, they bring a new perspective. And it's exciting.
I think so too. Just to watch the new folks on the internet, and how these things come up again, and then also remember, like, oh, I think that was about 1995. I kind of wrote that little post that's now become canon. Just hope I was right. Usually I am. I'm also willing to say, like, oh, I screwed that one up. More information I didn't have at the time. So, yeah, that's fun. So, Textler House Rat was my doorway in. And so, one of the other hobbies I have is to do family history. And I volunteered at a family history library for over 15 years. And what you do there is you learn how to read manuscripts. It's a unique skill set I have that I never was able to kind of move forward into the SCA world. And so to be able to read 16th century German is not easy, but after you do it for a while, you start to recognize patterns. So I'm actually this weird sort of dyslexic person that can't tell left from right. And I can read mirror image as well as I can read upside down backwards. So there's something twisty in the hemisphere between my brain. But so it means sometimes I have to pause in giving directions, and I can't draw worth a crap. But I do have awesome pattern recognition, right? So if I see something, I know it's right. So while it took a long time to make a B and a P and a Q, I will immediately recognize when it's right. It doesn't mean that I can transform it. But so I had that skill set. And then Drea Lade on the Elizabethan costuming list had an untranslated raw copy of Schnittbuch, or a bunch of patterns that were rescued out of a paper dump that were for a guild. And so she reached out and asked, can anybody read any of these? Like, oh, okay, I'm going to try. And I could read some of the words, right? So this is one of these things where persistence paid off. Then I went and I did some research. I found a book that actually transcribed some of the words, so that allowed me to put an alphabet together. And then I started to be able to read them all. And then when my friend Marion went to Berlin to the costume museum there, she got to see more. And so she came back with images and asked, like, would you translate? We could do a book. And so that's what kind of started this whole project here. And I'm super proud of this. So we're working on volume 2 now, but but my piece of this was to be able to kind of read this funky writing. Let's see if I get that there. So I don't know if that shows up as backwards in the camera, but anyway, I really amazed myself that I was able to read it and then also able to understand what it said in terms of sewing. So I think all of these three key things, the fact that I was the answer lady on a chat line, I studied manuscripts and reading early manuscripts at with something else, and also that I had made clothing, and taught myself how to do it, came together in a fusion here, kind of interdisciplinary, and that's what kind of allowed me to do this. And the thing I'm proudest the most of for this, there's a whole chapter on German textiles that nobody's done any work on before. So, and there's 100, I think, and 41 altogether, different brand names of textiles in here. So who would have thought? And then they might have a different color, might have a different texture. They come in different grades, and some are better quality, and this is how much you should pay for them. I found a merchant's manual from the 16th century that goes to all the fairs. It's for up and coming merchants to tell them, okay, here's what you should be looking for, and here's how much in general you should be paying for it. I'd like to translate that. I think it would be fun. So
Katrine, let's go back to that book you had in your hand.
Okay.
Tell me more about that.
So this is Marion in my book. So I don't know how many years it's been now. So let me look at what's the date on this? It's so long ago. So meanwhile, I did this. I decided that I got to go to grad school. So all time stopped. And I don't know why I did that, but.
So when you say that's your and Marion's book, you guys wrote that book.
We wrote this book in 2015.
Okay.
So.
I wanted to make that really clear.
Okay. Marion and I wrote this book. So she did the pieces she pulled the art together, and she wrote the little synopses in the chapter, and I did all the translating. And then we had another lovely person from Germany. Her name is Tina, and she lives in the town where Chronic is from. So she's got a great Chronic museum, and she's a digital artist. And she said, please, 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 can I do it? And so, I had taught myself how to use Illustrator, and I was going to do it, but she did like 20 in the time it took me to do half a one. So
wow.
We hired her to be our fabulous digital artist for this. So, and we have all the digital art done for the next one. So these were 3 Austrian tailors' books that were rescued. They're toward the end of the 16th century. So what these books are about is a part of the guild system where you start as an apprentice and then you work your way up to a journeyman. And so if you want to be a master tailor, you have to take a test. And I don't know, I'm hoping everybody here has seen the back of a modern pattern. And inside the layout sheet where like how you should lay your fabric out. And these drawings are like the 16th century equivalent of that and what's on the back of a pattern, right? So this is what your basic layout looks like. This is how much fabric you need of this width. And so they didn't have standardized widths like we did. So if velvet was only about 24 inches wide, so if you're going to make it out of velvet, you need a lot more. So there's a lot of proportional math going on in here. So what the test would consist of is 2 parts, well, 3 parts really. The first part was a question and answer where the master would say, if you want to make this sort of gown and your customer wants it out of this fabric, how much fabric does your customer need to bring you? Because usually it's the customer that purchases the fabric and brings it to the tailor. So you need to know that in order to conduct your business. So I believe there were about 12 questions like that. The second part of this is your customer has brought you 6 3/4 L's of this fabric. Here's chalk and here's a table. How would you lay out your pattern? And the apprentice, the journeyman, would have to lay it all out to show you how he would cut out this. And then the final thing is you had to make a masterpiece, right? So you would have so much time, and you would need to make this. It would tell you need to make this garment and bring it back for inspection by the other masters. So some of the folklore of tailor guilds suggests that there was a lot of graft and, human behavior going on. In order to advance anywhere, you have to know how to play the game on top of it. But so these books are the books that are kept by the master. So when he's asking you the question, he may be referencing this book as either his own personal cheat sheet, or I don't know if the tailors, the apprentices, and the journeymen were allowed to look at these cut books. We just don't know that. We don't have a reference to that, but we hope we're able to do that and use that to study. So that's what these are. And so there's tents and flags and Catholic robes and academic robes and men's clothing and women's clothing. One of them also had the sumptuary laws of the area, so which include, okay, if the tailor is caught making these velvet breeches and they're not allowed to be wearing them, then they can be fined for 3 times of what the article is worth, right? So no, I'm sure there was a lot of slipperiness going on there too, but all of those are listed there. And then the last piece to being in the guild, it was like being in a trade union very much, is that if you were part of it, if you got sick, your bread and beer was provided to you, right? So you're not going to starve because the other fellow members put money into the guild chest to take care of you. Also, some either fines or money you had to pay to advance also went to this chest, and it would buy wax for a member when he died, for candles for his remembrance. So also you're supposed to process when one of your members dies. So it was a little bit like a fraternal society, but I think it's a lot like a trade union in general. So paid your dues, got a couple bennies, especially if you got hurt on the job or whatever. So I thought that was a pretty neat social contract. But then tailors never actually were a very rich trade, right? So still today, we're always trying to get a good deal on clothes, unless you have a lot of money and then you can buy status.
Yeah.
And, but for the most part, people are just trying to, like, I only got 3 pennies, and you want 2, you do it for 1.5, sort of thing, right? And also in one of these books was a whole section of directions on how to make patterns without the drawings that accompanied it. So it's like, oh, if only there were drawings. But one interesting one is the kind of Pluderhose that the later Germans wear. Those are the really baggy pants with all of the panes and slits on them. And so what it says is very interesting, that they were made that way. So when they were out in the field, and if a pike hit them, it tangled up the pike and didn't hit them. So that was something I never read anywhere else. It's just like this little sentence inside of a description on how to make these Landsknecht pants.
Do you think it was like a joke, or do you think that was for real?
Oh, I think it probably was for real. I mean, I don't. Let me show you let me show you another picture, because this is a crack up too. My fighting career.
I didn't know that you fought.
Well, I don't know that I would actually call that fighting, but let me find the picture, because I think you'll laugh. So I went to an event one time, and I decided it was a big gung-ho, let's everybody fight light. So I made myself some leather clothes, and I got all decked up to fight light. And maybe I was just too much of a girly girl. I actually kind of rather enjoyed it, but I had a loner helmet, and the buckle scratched my face. And I decided, I don't know that I'm going to have any of that. So this was my storied fighter career as a light fighter. That was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
I remember one time, I think we were up in the hills, some Boy Scout camp, one of the Alpine Wars, that's what it was. And I was over on the side watching the light folks just bombard the heavy fighters. And I saw a fuzzy tennis ball of death hit Duke Torgel, and he did the most exquisite death I've ever seen on the field. He was like, ah. I just thought he's playing the game, and it was one of those magic moments for me, like, oh, he just made that so real. Yeah. And nobody was like taking the light infantry very serious in the early days. So I don't know if they actually even do that anymore, but I imagine they do. Yeah, so there's my storied fighter story.
So I have a couple pictures as well.
Okay.
Let me see if I can pull them up.
Oh yeah, I have a second SCA career as a foodie.
Yeah, Eduardo is asking questions about that. So there's one, there it is. That's the one I want to start with. So.
Oh yeah, I was on Harrod's retinue.
Oh.
One time, yeah.
Where'd it go? There it is. So this is you with, oh my gosh, her name just went out of my head.
Arius, the innkeeper's daughter, right?
Yes, who is like best friends with Harrod.
Yeah. So yeah, we did a retinue. That was the Persian court we all got dressed up for. That was a ton of fun.
Very cool. And then I just have some recent pictures of you that I pulled off Facebook. I love this picture because here you are sewing during the event.
That's never happened. Where is that picture? Let's see.
Here, let's talk about your cooking.
Oh yeah. So once I understood that I could read old German books, there was I don't know who got me into this. Maybe it was Raffenswava.
Mm.
And so then I thought, oh, this is really interesting, and I started to translate some recipes. I have a pretty good start on translating a whole book, but then more and more and more and more books came popping up. And so then, my librarian thing kind of kicked in. It's like, how are these all alike? How are these all different? And I started to measure. So one of the pieces of work I did is there's a broad category of food called gebakens, which I think we could call fritters in English, but like what made a gebakken a gebakken? It ended up being that they almost all had eggs and flour in them of some sort, right? But they ranged in a lot of ways. So I did a class on that one time by analyzing all the recipes I could find, and then an internet friend that found like 7 or 8 16th century manuscripts that haven't even been transcribed yet. It's like, oh, I thought it was done. So I have 2 whole shelves in my studio of printed out manuscripts that are wanting my attention. So I have indexed them all. I just need to, but I did it all in handwriting, so I have to type that all up. But I think that will be interesting I have indexed every 16th century German cookbook. So, but I got to get it together to try to figure out how to present it. And maybe it's just the titles of the recipes and where to find them if you're interested. It's probably more work than any one person can do in a lifetime. It's a huge pile of stuff. But for one, I think I'd like to pull out all the gebakens, all of the fritter recipes, and make a complete book of 16th century German fritters. So I think it all started with funnel cakes, and actually that their period, and they poured them through the funnel, and then they put sugar and maybe cinnamon on top. So so that was kind of it, and then got really interested in cooking. Helping in the feast hall was a lot of fun. I don't know that I really want to be the head chef ever, but I love to be a helper. Really good helper. That's awesome. And I love to grill too. So I've got a great picture of me here. I don't know that this made it onto Facebook or not, but or maybe it's on Facebook. But this is me at Perfectly Period Feast, playing in the charcoal. Boy, did I get dirty. But I'm kind of a messy girl. Let's see if I can share this.
Morgana says the apricot dessert thing you made at Culinary Symposium may be her single most delicious thing she's ever eaten.
What did I make? Was that like the fritter with the marzipan in it that's deep fat fried with sugar?
Probably.
And maybe cream cheese. None of those things are bad. So here I am, like at Perfectly Period Feast, roasting the lamb outside. That was a ton of fun. I could do that all day long. I love to cook that way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I have some more pictures of the Perfectly Period Feast. Let me pull those up.
I also helped in the last one we did, which was a ton of fun too.
Well, let's just go through these real quick. I only have about 10, and
okay.
You can tell me. So this is Finn's.
Oh, Finn's belt.
Belt.
I can see it small, but I can't see it larger, so I didn't know.
Oh, okay, yeah. So this is for his pelican.
I love that it was made from. You used kind of the 12th century original as a model for it.
And then this is you on the balcony at the Perfectly Period Feast.
I don't see it coming up, so I just see me in the peacock outfit. So I don't know if they're actually changing when you go through that.
Okay.
Or if it's just
well,
me.
Maybe I'm just going to stop sharing because I can't get it to work right. Sorry. We'll just skip all that. Oh. So tell me about Perfectly Period Feast.
So the last one was a German one, so so much fun, and kind of worked in the kitchen, helped with the menu planning and the overall idea for it, like what how could we get Chronic dresses together with the Landsknecht dresses? What would be plausible? I came up with a wedding in the right area of the right kind of nobility and who would be coming, and then we worked through some recipes we had out of a cookbook that came from that period, and it was Holly that did all of that incredible work to pull it together while she was working on her PhD to boot. Like, I just have to say what a wonderful job she did. Yeah. I mostly, hung out in the kitchen and made a mess. I chopped apples and I cooked sauerkraut and went out and gossiped and went back in and washed a whole bunch of dishes, but really felt great from the service point of view side, like doing something to make people happy. It's the greatest thing.
It is. You also make a lot of costumes for other people.
I do, because that's fun.
One of our favorite Ontarian traditions is making costumes for royalty, and you've done a lot of that.
I don't even know that I can go back and remember them all.
I think that it's one of the
lots of taxes, as I sometimes call it.
I think it's one of the most unsung forms of service in our kingdom, because not all kingdoms do that.
Yeah, but our royalty always looks fabulous.
They do. It's a labor of love. Do you have a favorite outfit that you've made for royalty?
No, I don't really think about it. Like, I'm drawing a blank. Like, I love them in all of them, right? Just, and hopefully they love them too.
Yeah. Um, Going through your photos, I've noticed that you have played a lot in summits recently.
Well, I live 2 miles from the border. So I see I've got this fantasy that I'm like a border warden and that I raid on both sides. So I would like to one time really foment a war between Three Mountains and Terra Primaria just by, stealing their apples across the Pudding River.
We can call it
So,
Katrine's
yeah,
War.
and so they're pretty close. And so I am kind of close to the folks in Terra Primaria. They're it's about as long to go visit them as it is to go into Three Mountains for an event. But I go all around, so I've had friends in Dragon's Nest and Three Mountains and Mountain's Edge, Terra Primaria. I'll just kind of show up. It's pretty random too.
You get around and you teach everywhere too.
Sometimes I show up to Blotha Nor and just freak the oldies out, like, Katrine, where have you been? Or I'll call up some old friends that don't do this anymore and like, I want somebody to go with me, and then they'll show up, and then we truly freak out. The oldies like, uh-oh, they're together again. Trouble's coming.
That's awesome. So you mentioned Jana as sort of a costuming mentor. Did you have a Laurel that was your Laurel, or did you have a mentor coming up in the SCA that kind of helped you through stuff? Or
Well, not actually the work wise, but certainly I had influences. Mistress Cat was a great influence. Always really admired her academic achievements and how she you could ask her a question and she could say, well, maybe that isn't the right tact, or no, that's not always right. I think the less you know, the more likely you are to make pronouncements about things. And she was always really very gentle with correction. So Martha Monty, Maria Viero's note in Falkenfeld has ferrets, and she was a great mentor in terms of, at some point after 22 or 23 years, I kind of wondered, I've been working on a body of work for a long time, but you can see I'm kind of multifaceted, right? It's like I don't always do the same thing, and I'm, short attention span theater, so I can make costumes for a long, long time, and they're getting better. But at what point, do I do a breakthrough? And I think it just kind of all came together to be, worthy to be a Laurel. But it didn't mean that I didn't want to, right? And to come to grips with like, how long is this taking? Will anybody ever notice? Or she was really good in kind of giving me gentle advice.
yeah.
And mostly I'm self-taught. I think I have a real independent streak in me, which is both good and both bad. So one of the things you learn in business school is you have to take these personality kind of profile things. And so I got high marks for independence and leadership, but when you went to the collaboration score, that was pretty low. It's like, oh, I thought that it's not that I don't collaborate well, it's just that it's not my preferred means of doing things. So I've really been working on that. I try to reach out, do more team projects, and I'd like to get back to an event. I need some new clothes, and I need some inspiration to make something new.
Same. I have been I promised myself I would make myself new clothes, and I've been making my husband fighting gear because it's easier to do that than work on your own stuff, I guess. I don't know. So you started playing in 1980 and you were laureled in 2006.
It was 26 good years.
That's a really long time.
It's a really long time. At around 20 years, I had some frustration. Like, I don't know, maybe this is not for me. But you know what? There was a Jackson Brown that song that came out, and it's called About My Imagination. And there's a line in it that says, I'm taking charge of my elevation. Right? And so that's like, okay, this is my theme song now. You know, if I'm going to elevate myself, it isn't anybody else's business. This is my own. So I try to really work very hard at being professional, having more output, really working to take the time. You've probably been there, like, oh, this is due on Saturday. Do I just kind of whip this together, or do I spend the extra 3 hours to make the tiny little stitches to make this right? And so it's a culmination of little patient decision making like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna be particular and do it to the best of my ability.
And it's hard. I mean, I had Ludwika to make me do that stuff. And I still, when I'm sewing and I want to go and take that shortcut, I hear her voice, you know, and I hear her go, those are huge. And I'm like, okay.
My friend Jenna was good this way, although she's been gone for 20 years now. She just passed away suddenly one day from a heart attack. Just boom, fell over and was gone. Like, we're hardly ready, right? We haven't even like turned 40 yet. And I remember the first thread I ever spun on a drop spindle, and she said, she was a great sarcastic one, like, how does it feel to make a thread a 6-year-old would get beaten for? Or my other favorite one, it looks like you're sewing with a fish hook. So I had a long way to improve. And I had to make myself do it. I promised myself I'd never use that on anybody else.
I do the same, but then I wonder if I'm doing a disservice because it was so effective for me, right?
It was, but you know, she said it with love, right? And it was her personality too, to say these outrageous things.
That's awesome. So do you have students now?
Well, Jason Jeffrey is technically my apprentice. I don't know how he's feeling about playing lately. I was like, he's got other things going on in his life with his career. And the first thing I told him is, like, it took me 26 years. If you're not in a hurry, don't be in a hurry, right? It's the journey that's really the joy. And then once you get there, if you're not used to improving yourself, what are you going to do?
Exactly. Yeah,
You're
it's
not
really
going to like pick up and do more, right? So got another book. I have other ideas. One of the things I want to do that I really love, and from the beginning of MTV, I've always really loved short little music videos. And so I saw these the dream videos that somebody beautifully crafted and put together. I've always wanted to be a videographer and put together SCA videos. I don't know that I will do it, but I'm considering, when I'm finally done with this silly pathway in school that I put myself on, that maybe I'll take some classes in that, see if I can learn some skills there, because I think that would be a fun thing to do, even in terms of how to teach others.
mm-hmm.
Because I think that's kind of the next space that the SEA could go, that kind of really fills the void, to create that knowledge base out there for everybody to see.
Yeah, it's one of the things that COVID has really highlighted, and people are just flocking to fill that void. It's amazing the content that's out right now. I was going to ask you, oh, it just went out of my head. When you got Laurels, so you had this 26-year lead up to this thing, and then it happened. Was it what you expected?
It was sweet, right? It was sweet, right? It was just sweet to feel the love. You know, as humans, as somebody that's independent, right? It's okay for me for long stretches of time to just skirt around the edges and play with everybody, but it was really nice to be saying, like, come here. Have somebody say that. That was sweet. Now it's making me tear up. Yeah, it was nice. I
And
did, and I think I've actually done, more serious work since my laureling than before, when it's more about being noticed for things that actually happen in the SEA and the kind of the clothes you wear and being present. But I've always been present in the background. For 26 years, working on a bulletin board to let everybody know that was interested and sharing. So it's a great wealth that I'm lucky to be able to have accumulated. Not all of it is visible. So
right, I had completely forgotten about the book that you did, which was a huge deal, right? And when you showed it to me, I was like, oh my God, that book. Oh yeah,
yeah, that took a year or two.
because you've done so much. It's so you're so you have so much breadth and so much depth. It's amazing. When you got Laurel, were you surprised? Were they did it just get, you knew it was coming?
No,
Somebody,
so I'm highly perceptive.
yes, you
So,
are.
yeah, so I figured something was afoot, but I did. On the other hand, it was myself telling like, oh, you might be dreaming. You've been hoping for this for a long time. Don't set yourself up.
Mm. So did you get a fancy vigil and the whole bit, or
We did do a vigil at along with I'm gonna call her Laura. um,
Kalja?
no, her name just went out of my brain because she's got two names now. They're both gone.
Oh,
I'll tell you. She's my sister Laurel. We were Laurel on the same day.
Laura Minnick.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Yeah.
so la, 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 la,
What is her SCA name?
just like, I hope she's not watching. She's gonna kill me.
Somebody needs to save us from this.
La, 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 la.
She's another person that it took a long time. She just did so much in-depth research. Same thing. That background foundational research thing that is not the big shiny, in your face all the time thing, and it just takes a little longer.
It does. I like I said, I can't draw. It's difficult to do flashy artistic things, but I have an artist soul. Right?
Totally.
So what's really neat about this is that when I first started to sew, I had spatial disability. Like, how do you make that piece of fabric bend around your body and fit? So I had to learn that the slow and very hard way, working in a sheet metal shop to see like, oh, if you bend it this way, it moves like this. So I had to learn all the kinesthetics from it. So I'm happy with myself for having overcome that, because other people may have looked at that and said, oh, that's not my cup of tea, or that's not going to be something I ever master. But I really sat down to like, okay, from knowing nothing,
Right.
to be able to translate this book and also make the garments in it without having a natural pattern from a body measurement. So, and
That's
some
pretty
people
badass,
people
Katrine.
capture that right away, and maybe that's not a very big deal, but for me that was a huge deal too.
I think it's a huge deal. I think it's amazing. I've never done anything like that. It's a huge deal. Don't sell yourself short. There's a reason that both my sister and I have huge artist crushes on you.
But also, I've never been the kind of person that kind of goes da da da. Here I am, right? So there's a certain amount of theater to being an artist, and I haven't really had that either. So that's why it's 26 years. I know the reasons why. It wasn't anything insidious but I just had to be ready.
Yeah, it's that critical mass point, right?
You certainly don't have to do everything that I did to become a Laurel, for sure. And some people do way more, right? So
Everybody's path is different, and it's part of what makes it difficult to mentor people along the path is they see somebody who maybe they think has a similar path to them getting recognition and they're not, and it's like, well, what is happening? What am I doing wrong? And sometimes there's not a clear answer to that.
Well, what I tell other people as well is that there's a significant social piece to this, and if you have some adeptness and you're extroverted and you can move that way, it sometimes is easier because you make more connections. And yeah, I'm definitely introverted, very introverted in terms of the game is all inside. The game is here, it's not out here, right? So I was kind of playing my own game, and but for other people, it can be vastly different experience, and they grow and they feed and they become better people from that collaboration. That's what I was kind of talking about, like, oh, always learning about myself.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really what the path of peerage, to peerage and beyond is about, is learning about yourself. If you came across somebody now who was like yourself, very introverted, but also incredibly talented and well researched and making cool stuff, but wasn't getting recognized, what would your advice to them be?
Well, first of all, my advice for everybody is make sure you're doing it for yourself and that it's a passion that you're feeding, because then if it never happens, it really doesn't matter, right? At some point, the mastery is there, recognized or unrecognized, but you can recognize it in yourself. The external validation is nice, but it's the internal validation that's the goal. When you're no longer like, I'm not worthy. I have to say, I didn't feel that when I became a Laurel. I felt like, oh, yes, it was nice that I was recognized, and yes, I felt like I belonged. And working at a university is a really interesting experience because you're in a room with highly educated people, and sometimes, I have degrees, but not as many as some of these, right? And they're super smart, and I'm taking notes and I'm contributing, and I'm, having this imposter syndrome, like, I don't know if I should be here. These people are all really smart, right? Smart enough, but not this Mensa, a bunch of smart people. And so, here's what happened at a meeting that kind of chilled me out. So we were having an argument in this committee meeting about something. There's about 15 people in the room, and the PhD that was in charge of the meeting, highly intelligent and finished, so very direct, right? Said something, and there was this word, and I know a lot of words, but I'd never heard this word before. It's like, oh my God, I'm so outclassed. I don't know what he meant, right? It's like, oh, I don't belong here. And then he blew out of the room, and then people were pulling out their computers to look at the word. So that was the moment I knew that, it's situational, right? So. Right. You don't know everything, and you can't always think that you're not worthy because you don't know something. You just have to sit down and figure out what it is. So that was a really important lesson that day. I told him that too. That was because I don't think he realized that he did that. He also told me that when you get a PhD in Finland, you get a top hat and a sword.
Oh, that's cool.
Here I think you just pass out from fatigue. And I said, did you have sword fights? And he said, yeah. That was kind of funny.
That's awesome. That's super awesome. I think it's really wonderful that you felt, when you got recognized, you felt completely comfortable and worthy. It took me 8 or 9 years to feel that. I did not feel that at all. And I still have because there's so many talented people, right? And sometimes I feel like I'm belong, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm so outclassed, I don't belong at all. So
well, that's not to say that there aren't moments that I don't feel outclassed. But I just feel like, I worked really hard. And I think it's 26 years too, right? So
Yeah, that's long enough. I think you're good.
well, there are other people that have played longer that haven't progressed either. So sometimes I worry about them a little bit, but maybe they're happy where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that happened for me when I got Laurel is I looked around and I'm like, well, there's all these other people that should be here before I should be here. So I got some work to do. And now I feel like I don't know enough about everybody else's talents. Like I don't feel like I'm connected enough to.
So that's one of these ideas of wanting to be a videographer, because I can be undercover just like I like, and collect footage and collect knowledge and get to meet people. So it's really interesting doing the Myers-Briggs, like the complete survey. And I'm totally introverted except on one level where I'm totally not introverted at all, and that's meeting new people. So I'm very comfortable meeting new people. I don't have any kind of level of shyness about approaching someone. Maybe it's all of that psychology in college, because I don't know what else is going on, but if I'm just standing there doing nothing, that's not very doggone interesting. And so this person standing next to me is going to be way more interesting. And so I've always felt really comfortable approaching people and talking to them and getting to know them. And so I feel like that's one of my hidden skills that I might be able to use if I kind of go ahead and work on being able to document things with a camera. Also kind of have an archivist heart, right? So
Yeah, oh, you
nice
totally do.
I went to look for that 1980 parade where I first saw whoever that was in that cart. Not a single stitch of information about that time period. It only exists in my memory, right? So
Yeah.
how nice it would be to have great memories of these things.
Yeah, and documentation. It's one of the reasons why we're doing these interviews, because people have been playing for 40 years and there isn't a lot of, I mean, the West Kingdom has a wonderful history site that has documented a lot of stuff, but Ontario doesn't really have anything like that. And so just getting some people's stories in is kind of exciting.
So now you know more about me then.
Yeah.
Who else is with us? Anybody? Everybody go away?
Nope, we have watchers. Eduardo's watching, Morgana's watching, Rafaela, Rifkin, a couple people from Artemisia. We've got people.
I lived in Artemisia for a while. So.
Oh, did you? Where in Artemisia did you live?
I lived south of Salt Lake City in a place called Arrows Flight, which I don't know if it's something now or not, right? But that was an interesting time too. I only lived there for about a year, and then came back. But now I think I don't know that are they. They might still be Artemisia. I'm not sure.
They are. Yeah, they are. Dame Eleanor says hi, and Finn says hi. You mentioned briefly that you're on another academic. Tell us what you're doing.
I'm studying business intelligence and analytics. So I told my boss about my Thanksgiving weekend. I had to do a final, and so I'm in a class that does analysis with linear algebra. Right, so I've always been fairly good in math, right? But the last time I took any algebra was in like 1979. So in order to get into this program, they had this thing where you had to have taken all the way up to calculus to get in. And then they decided that, all of the dumb people had not taken calculus, so they were going to take that away. And so I was going to do this, but then I'm not, like, I don't want to take 3 years of math to be ready for this. No way. No, I got better things to do, right? So, but then they took it away, and I thought, I could probably do this because I'm actually pretty good at analytics. And so at about week 4 of this class, the math kicked in. And all of the engineers and system scientists in the class had not a problem, but I was like,
Oh,
I forgot everything I ever knew. So it's week 10 now, and I've gotten through it, and I've got a good grade, but I told my boss there were tears and life regrets over Thanksgiving weekend because I never did pursue any kind of math in college, and even though I got a really good math score on my placement test, and my counselor said you should be a scientist. No, I want to do humanities. Um, so there was a moment of regret in taking that path, but not too much.
not too much.
The weekend of the final, I had regrets. So, that'll be done in May, and it's a postgraduate certificate, and then I may be done. I've often thought about getting a PhD, but we don't have a PhD program at my school for what I want to do. So I keep on lobbying for them to like, we need an interdisciplinary degree because I could do, anthropology, language, and history all at the same time and wrap them up into a really cool thing with this work I've already done. But the school doesn't, they had a program and then they discontinued it because I guess maybe nobody wanted to run it. So I keep on lobbying for that. If I don't do that, it'll be all right because the other things I want to do and get done before I check out.
Awesome.
Not soon, I hope.
Oh,
But it's
me
kind
too.
of like COVID to like remind you, like you two are mortal. Right?
Yeah.
What is your body of work?
And what are your priorities?
Yeah.
Really what do you want to focus on? Because like you, I have more fabric and beads than I can handle in a lifetime. So I'm like, right now, I can sew all I want, but I can't buy anything new. Nothing new comes in the house. I've got to use what's here.
I have enough to make many very cool outfits. I just really wish that, and I don't mind making them for other people. So if somebody needs something, that's where they're I love sewing for other people.
I do too. It's part of my problem. That's why I had to sew the front of this up because I made it for nursing Molly, who is now 11 and a half. And it's one of my newer pieces.
It's amazing to watch how quickly and how tall she's grown, how beautiful she is too. Good job, Mom.
Yeah, she's such a gift. She's getting super excited about doing card weaving now. And she really wants SCA friends. So, and Eduardo has like shouted me 3 times. He wants to be sewn for. So
Does he really?
you have your mission.
I have my mission.
If you
Let
choose
me know where I live, sir.
Did you hear that? She said, you know where she lives. So with COVID, what do you see? You're so busy with school. I don't even know if you're really kind of tracking what's going on in the SCA with COVID, but what do you see happening now that you would like to have continue?
Well, I guess what I've wanted to see at the SCA for a long time is for us to do more things like the Perfectly Period Feast that are all around a theme. I would really like to see thematic things done. One of the things I could say, and maybe this is, a little bit sacrilegious, but sometimes I get bored, right? So it's like the same Saturday and the same mosquito park, same, right? And so, yeah, I could take classes, but part of me wants to be like royally entertained. So there's something about having a theme, having things match, having maybe more like a convention, like this thing happens now and this thing happens now and this thing happens now. A little bit more programming. I'm not saying every event, but I'd like to see more of things like that.
That there's nothing that can touch that transportive feeling of being completely enveloped in the magic of an environment like that. And it's fun to help create it too.
And I enjoy that too.
Yeah.
that's one thing I would like to see. And then in terms of what really came to light is, I don't know if you remember when Yahoo Groups sent out the announcement, like, we're not going to archive what's in our discussions anymore. And the sheer loss of all the knowledge that was there in an ephemeral way, even to extract it now, even though we kept backups, is super hard. So trying harder to share things in an electronic and open way, right? So I don't know if the SCA can run a platform itself, and what's the SCA in the future going to look like? Are we really an educational association, or are we more of a fraternal association? Because I think we kind of straddle that line.
Yeah, I agree. And you're not the first person to bring that up. We have a generation that's starting to age out of life, right? And they
to the next the next place.
Going to the next place, and they have a huge body of work. They have this incredible knowledge and all of this research and all of these papers and books and things that, where does all that go?
Yeah, I was like trying to decide, maybe I'll live into my 90s and have another 30 years of book collecting, but what am I going to do with this complete bookcase of, in some cases, really rare books? And I thought about maybe I'll just bring them down to the university and ask the professor, who's your up and coming Shakespearean customer, because I got something for them. But who knows if, people 30 years from now even want to have a book, right? Will all of that knowledge be kind of integrated and online and easy to access? So that's the other thing I'd like to see is, books continue to go online, so you could just do a keyword search to find things. That was another thing that I learned, that I think that younger people haven't learned so much to use the library originally, was the card catalog. So you had to be really good at trying to figure out what the keyword was, where the person that was cataloging the stuff might have put it. And I ended up being pretty clever with that. And then when the internet came, that I'm able to find things on internet that younger people might not think about, because they're super literal about what they're looking for. And I have like that experience in knowing, like, how else could you phrase that? Or what's a related word? Or the other key tricky thing is to search for a word in Google Books in the original medieval spelling. It gets you a ton of stuff. Like, I don't know.
Or the language of the archaeologist that has written the book. That's, yeah, it opens up worlds. And that's my new trick now and I learned it from Kalja, who probably learned it from you, is when people are wanting information on something, I just give them new search words. Why don't you try searching this and then search that? And that way they're still working for it. I'm not just feeding them stuff, which I think is more rewarding for people to.
I think so. There's a little bit of a head rush when you find something. Oh, look at that's the perfect. What does nobody know about this?
Yeah, it's the joy of discovery. I think it's awesome. A lot of times people will send me links and I'll be like, okay, I don't want to look at it because I want to find it myself and get all excited.
Well, hopefully I get the second book out maybe this next year, which is another pattern book. And it has 93 patterns in it. It has some really interesting things in it. And so I'm already finished with the translation. So we just have to sit down and put it together and write the introduction. And
oh, wow. So you're close.
Yeah, we're pretty close. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think I did most of this work before I started school back up, but I need to translate a paper about that book, and it was written in 1885 or something. So it's in the old script and it's super tiny, right? Like glasses, you need magnifying glass.
Magnifying light thing.
It's not so easy to read because it's written in very Victorian-esque kind of flowery language. Like, try to get the true academic meaning out of it. So, and then I have another DVD of patterns from 1620 and 1640 from Leipzig that nobody's ever seen. That it would be fun to do, but that's a little bit outside of my research area. So, but I think it would be fun to do. So I don't know if Marion might want to do it or not.
Very cool. Are you planning to put any of this stuff, like you just mentioned, having books online? Is that part of your plan, is to do that as well, or just get it published? And
Well, so we're self-publishing. So at this point, it's nice to have the royalties from it, but
of course.
I don't, we don't make a ton off of each book, but I don't know. Half of it's mine and half of it's hers. So we kind of have to talk about that. But I think there's also some restrictions from the library that owns it itself, who let us have the drawings for free because we were doing an academic work.
Uh-huh.
That was pretty cool. Like I never.
That's super cool.
Academic work. There's somebody recognized that we're doing academic work because we're putzing around with our SCA stuff, right? So that was a nice thing. So the other piece of thing that is in my dreams to do is the chronic dress, which I have a love-hate relationship with. Mostly the hate part is the bias stretch that happens right along here when you're busty. It's hard to get that sucker to look good for you. But I know that there's an archive in Thuringia that has the Saxon courts Taylor records. There's 1,500 pages of them from 1473 to like 1617 or something like that. They want something. At first, this is maybe about 12 years ago, I asked them about access. Would they put them online? And that was early in the game. So I wanted to see them all. And then of course I got an invitation to come and look at them, right? Like I'm going to fly and live in Thuringia to do this. That's not really an option for me, but maybe they'll scan them now and put them up. But I want to look at the period from 1625 to 1635, see if there are any women's dresses in there, and to look at them with the light of like, how did these chronic dresses get made? Or are there references to inner linings? One pattern suggests there might be an underbodice that holds it all together and it comes up over the top of that. Then I found some dowries for some of the Saxon princesses as well that outline the dresses they're bringing with them. So I'd like to kind of put that all into kind of a work together. I think that would be fun. I think it would be a hit.
Absolutely.
A lot of people like that dress, and so it's one they want to make. And there's always an internal groan, like, oh. The other one's a lot easier and more comfortable.
But it's just so cool.
It is. They're beautiful. I just bought 10 yards of red velvet with the idea, like, I guess I should make one for me.
Yes, please.
Yeah, and I bought the special cloth of gold from Czechoslovakia to make the strips out of it. So I've got all the pieces. So I should maybe make it as part of that project. So once I finish this book, I think I'm going to write them and say, hey, how much would it cost to get a scan of these pages? Because I'll have 2 books under my belt and say, like, okay, the author here and author here, this is what we're trying to put together in terms of what we want to do. And then once I have a German colleague at work, and he said, you sure you can do it, but you got to sell them that you're the crazy American that really loves this stuff. So they got to know that you're not crazy. You might not have PhD credentials, but you know what you're doing, right? So
that you're totally legit.
Yeah. I guess you have to like convince them of that. Just the first letter didn't convince them. Like, well, if you're legit, you'll come here and look at it.
Send them a copy of your book, then that maybe they'll get a clue, right?
Maybe so. And so those are the kind of things that are like on my plate beside just playing.
And Eduardo says, and the cookbooks.
And the cookbooks. I do like the cookbooks a lot. I had this interesting experience with the cookbook when I was making some almond milk. And I guess the period recipes, you crush it in a mortar and you add the water to it. And so I pulled out the blender and I put in some almond slivers and put some water in it. And it went, and I swear I felt the ghost of that cookbook writer behind me going, in German, like, that's an amazing machine. Right. So I just want to think about a lifetime spent crushing almonds to make almond milk. And I was like,
powerful wizard.
True.
On many levels.
I could swear I heard a voice like, "Das ist ein schöner Maschine," like, "Oh, ganz schön." As she figured out what was going on. So yeah, it was fun to make some of those recipes and figure out what they thought about food. Yeah, my favorite recipe is one that's for chicken. So this is specifically for leftover chicken that's already cooked, and it said, "This will make the Lords lick their fingers." So, and it was basically cooked chicken that was breaded and fried. I laughed about that for days. Finger licking good. It's not new. There's nothing new under the sun.
They stole their marketing from there.
I don't think they even know, but
I'm sure they don't. That's funny. Huh. Well, is there anything that we're coming up on hour and 45 minutes, which is fine. I could go forever, but you probably want to go on with your evening. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about?
I think we kind of covered my SCA career pretty well, and my hopes for the future, and my love for you, for all of you guys. Like, my life has been so full, right? I can't even imagine life without the SCA. I know everybody's been in a snit where, like, I'm never going back because somebody did something stupid, right?
Right.
You're grumped out, you're camping, you've got the headache, you might have a hangover, you had too much wood smoke, right? And somebody said something stupid to you, right? Like, I'm never going back, I'm quitting this thing. I've quit better jobs than this. And then, you're having your little snit, and then you just go back because the people you love, it's your village.
Yeah, it's totally the village. And I'm finding myself, the longer this staying home thing goes on, I'm finding myself processing a lot of those old grudges and going,
what was that about?
Let's let that go now. That's not a big deal. In the scheme of all of this, let it go. It's been really freeing. So I'm hoping other people are able to do the same. And I hope that people come back. I guess we'll see.
I think they will. I think they will come back.
I hope so. David says rotisserie chicken.
Rotisserie chicken.
101 recipes.
Did you want that one for your rotisserie recipes? Is that it?
I think so.
I love David's creativity. He's just amazing himself.
He is. We are so fortunate to be surrounded by so many incredible, diverse, magical people.
Yeah, and how we found each other is nothing short of amazing either in this modern world. Especially in 1980, I connected because I saw a poster on an elevator somewhere for a Beltane celebration.
It's amazing. And for me, it was a piece of jewelry on a woman in an Irish pub. And here I am 20 something years later. So it's kind of a cool thing. Anyway, I will start to shut it down then. Thank you so much for your time and your energy tonight.
to see a person and the people behind you, even though they can't see them, but.
There's some mannequins.
Mannequins and the lovely work.
None of those coats are finished, by the way, because they're for me.
Okay.
Tomorrow, Rifkin and I are interviewing Duke Fluke, and next year I have Mistress Bree from the Outlands on the Branch of Laurels interview, and Rifkin and I are interviewing Duke Dax. So that'll be fun. He doesn't talk a lot, so I'm hoping that he feels super talky. We'll see. Anyway, thank you, Katrine. It's so wonderful to see your face.
Kisses and loves to everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Good night.